The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, again, hello everyone. It's about a minute past 7, and we'll get started. Hope that all of you have been successful this week with whatever you've tried to do, and that you're practicing talking about. And this evening we'll introduce a few more new ones. So remember that if you have a question, you can type it in the question field over there on the student panel, and I'll try to answer those as we go along or later in the broadcast. This is being conducted in listen-only mode, so you need not worry about a microphone. Okay, I want to just review very quickly what we did last week. We talked about limiting beliefs and how these will keep you from being successful. And we talked about developing new beliefs by acting as if something new is true. And hope that you practice some of those methods, because those are very important. And we're going to talk about a couple more things this evening that you can try. Another technique that we talked about was being able to visualize the outcomes that you're looking for, particularly future success outcomes. This is an extremely important thing for you to do, because everything in this universe seems to be created twice, once in the mind of a person who visualizes an outcome, and then subsequently out here in the quote-unquote material world. Another technique we discussed right at the very end of last week was rewriting history, going back in your memory if you happen to have had an unpleasant episode in your life, an unhappy incident of some kind, or, as a lot of people say, an unhappy childhood, going back and imagining it differently. And we discussed the fact that this is not just self-deception, because your memories are generally your interpretation anyway, and you would be hard-pressed to prove that some of them were absolutely true. Anais Nin is quoted as having said that we don't see the world as it is, but as we are. It actually goes back to Anais Nin to the Torah, which means about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. They said that in the Old Testament of the Bible. Another technique we talked about was gratitude. It's very important that we be grateful for what we have, and if we're not grateful for what we have, the universe tends just to stop giving things to us. And the last thing we talked about last week was developing a habit of giving something to people in the world in terms of service, contributions, smiles, cooperation, anything that you can give that makes the world a better place. And so those were the things we talked about last week. This week, we're going to talk about finding your purpose in life, because it's a sad statement that a lot of people go through life without ever actually finding what they are intended to do and be in this world. And hopefully when we go through this exercise, it will give you some, pardon me, I hit a button incorrectly here. Hopefully it will give you some idea what will be fulfilling for you. I've been very fortunate that I discovered my purpose fairly early in life, back in the 60s and 70s, and it has made quite a difference in how I've lived. Another thing we want to talk about today is chunking down your goals, because one of the things that can be paralyzing is trying to pursue a goal that is way too big. And so we'll talk about that. More ways of changing beliefs. And then there's one that is a problem for a lot of folks, and it's called the inner critic. And how do you silence your inner critic so that you don't have to listen to its chatter, and it tends to drag you down. And then I want to talk about how you deal with bad situations. It turns out there are actually 4 choices that we all have, always and forever. And that itself is empowering, because one of the things that paralyzes us is to think that we don't have any choices, that we're stuck. There's only one option and we don't like it, and so life is really bad. And then the last topic for this evening is some of you are going to find that you have to get rid of some of your friends who are toxic friends. And we'll define that and discuss that as we go along here. So that's what we're up to tonight, and or tonight my time. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, for those of you that don't remember or don't know, and that's in the mountains of North Carolina. So it's 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time here, and I know some of you are in other parts of the world where the time zone is different, and it may actually be morning. I know someone is from Singapore, so they're just getting their day started. I came across an example of how acting as if actually can help you work, help you get where you want to be. This was in a blog by Michael Michalko, who is a fabulous fellow who wrote a book called Thinker Toys. I really love the little book. It's full of creativity techniques, and Michael talks about Vincent van Gogh, who wanted to be an artist, and he turned himself into an artist by acting like one. And every day he went through the motions of turning out bad, rough sketches day and night. And in Van Gogh's own words, he said, "In spite of everything, I shall rise again and take up my pencil and draw and draw." And so for those of you that have not really internalized the need to practice being what it is you want to be, this is an extremely important technique and one that I greatly encourage. Now, one thing I'd like to talk about tonight is that you think about forming pods. It turns out that most people need a little bit of boost from time to time from other people, and so one of the ways to do that is to form pods of 3 to 6 people. Generally 4 is a real good number. And the pods will generally meet about once a month for an hour, hour and a half over the phone or on the internet or whatnot, and talk about where you are, if you're having any kind of problems, if you're feeling stuck, if you need a bit of advice or whatnot. And so one of the ways that you can do that is to use a free service called Free Conference USA, which provides you with a bridge line where all of you can call into the bridge line and be connected to each other. And so the URL is shown right here on the slide. And then there's also Skype. I know Skype now has a conference mode, and I'm not sure how many people can be connected to it, but I know it's 3 and possibly 4. GoToMeeting allows you to connect as many as 20 people. It's not totally free, but it's not very expensive. And then Live Meeting by Microsoft is available. There's also a program called Campfire, and I'm sure if you get on the internet and Google meeting programs, you'll find some others that I don't even know about. And then what I would suggest you do is get on the How Can I Be Successful website, and there is a place there where you can make a list and ask for other people to contact you so that you can form. And if you aren't able to do that successfully, then write me an email and I'll see what I can do to help boost this whole thing. But I think you can probably form these on the website itself, so take a look at that facility. Okay, let's get into the content. There's an old joke that asks, how do you eat an elephant? And of course the answer is one bite at a time. And as I said earlier, we get paralyzed by trying to eat the elephant in one bite, which is what happens with large projects. Now, most of you know that I've been teaching project management seminars for the past 32 years and ran projects professionally for 15 years before that in industry. And so this is something that I have seen over and over again, that people get stuck on projects because they don't break them down to manageable size. As a matter of fact, one of the people that's online tonight is Doug DiCarlo, who's a good friend of mine and a neighbor who lives up on a mountain behind me. And Doug has written a book called Extreme Project Management and teaches a seminar by that same name. It's akin to Agile project management, and one of the techniques that they use is time boxing, where they plan projects in little bite-sized pieces. They don't pretend to be able to see from the very beginning to the very end of the project in one glance. Rather, they try to do a week at a time, a month at a time at the most, sometimes even a day at a time, because they have stand-up meetings early in the morning and talk about what needs to be done that day. And that means they can't plan or develop a rigorous schedule for a project, but it's a very fluid approach, and it does get very good results in a lot of projects. So some of you may want to take a look at Doug's book and some of the ideas that he presents in there. And he's not paying me to tell you this, by the way. Okay, so examples of bite-sized objectives. Instead of talking about how much you want to earn per year, how much would you like to earn in a week? Okay, that's not nearly as intimidating as saying I want to earn $100,000 in a year. Instead, you want to earn $2,000 in a week, or break that down and, you know, $400 in a day or something of that nature. For those of you that are into the weight loss business, if you set a target to weigh 5 pounds less in a month than you do now, that sounds a lot less intimidating than saying I've got to lose 50 pounds. And so you break those things down a little bit at a time. I will tell you, however, it's again not a good idea to set negative goals. Losing weight is a negative goal. So instead you say, if you weighed 150 pounds this week, by the end of the month I want to weigh 145 pounds. So that's a positive approach as opposed to negative. And I know it sounds like nitpicking perhaps, but that's the way the mind works. It works best on positive goals instead of negatives. Now, I'm going to tell you from personal experience, this last one, I did this back about 1970. I had been smoking since I was a kid, and I tried to quit cold turkey a couple times. And when you try to quit smoking cold turkey, your mind absolutely rebels on you. It just fights you and says, no, 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 I've got to have a cigarette. I've got to have a cigarette. And so I read somewhere, don't try to quit smoking. Simply tell yourself, okay, I'll smoke another cigarette in 15 minutes. So you delay for 15 minutes. You do that for a few days until it becomes second nature. Then you increase the time to 30 minutes, and you do it for a week or so, and then you increase it to 45 minutes, and then an hour, whatever works for you. And at the end of about 3 weeks, I had gotten down to smoking 3 cigarettes a day instead of a pack, okay? And when I got down to 3 cigarettes a day, I said, okay, that's it. I don't need them anymore. And I'm happy to say I haven't smoked a cigarette since then. I will tell you that I found myself reaching for my pocket where I kept my cigarettes in those situations where I usually lit up. For example, most people who smoke will tell you that a cigarette right after a meal is nice, or a cigarette in a bar is nice. And that is a habitual thing, whereas the nicotine component is an addictive thing. So I did find myself reaching for cigarettes, and it took a while for that to completely go away. But I have not touched a cigarette and will not, because probably if I were to pick up a cigarette and start smoking, I would be hooked again, even after all these years. And that's been, as I say, since about 1970. Okay, so I found this little cartoon. I have several cartoons in here that hopefully will give you a chuckle. Our sales goals are delusional party, is what this person is saying. Sometimes we feel like our goals are delusional, that they're impossible. And of course, if they feel impossible and overwhelming, then we're not likely to be very committed to trying to meet them. And that's why chunking them down can help you quite a bit, because they don't seem impossible when you chunk them down. It is a whole lot easier to do something small than something very large. All right, so that's just a little flashback to the previous weeks where we talked about goal setting and so on, because goal setting is a major part of the whole process of being successful. So tonight I want to talk about finding your purpose in life, because it is important that when you try to be successful, you're trying to be successful in pursuit of your own purpose in life, because it'll work a whole lot better if you do that. And so I'm going to present you with a technique that I actually used when I changed careers. I was an engineer for 15 years, decided that I wanted to switch to something else, and I wasn't sure exactly what that something else would be. And I was fortunate enough to find a book that I believe is still in print, but if it isn't, you can still do the technique. The book was called Where Do I Go From Here With My Life? And it was for the midlife career changer. And I was about 35 at the time, so it fit me perfectly. And one of the things that they had me do was look back over my life at those activities and things that I had gotten into and gotten involved in that had been extremely fun, helpful, involving. I really got immersed in them. I enjoyed them and found myself going back to them over and over again. And so here's the way to go about this. Think back over your life, and especially the past year. The reason for that being that it's good to be able to remember stuff that's fairly recent. And ask yourself what kind of activities you find yourself becoming lost in. That is, you become so immersed in those activities that you lose track of time. You resent the intrusions from your body. Your body's saying, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I've got to go pee, etc., etc. And if you are in an activity that that you get so involved in that you resent those intrusions, that's a perfect example of what I'm looking for. Now, if nothing occurs to you during that 1 year time frame, going back further in your life and ask yourself to look for pattern. And ask yourself, what are the primary things you enjoy about the overall activity? Examples include being innovative, that is, creating something new or coming up with novel ideas for things. Helping other people, sharing your expertise, engaging in some sort of artistic pursuit such as painting, playing music, drawing, whatever it may be. Dancing and that sort of thing would also be included. And I just want to say one thing about this. Please do not exclude these things from your list. A lot of people think that artistic stuff is just for fun, and they tend to write those off. They don't want to go there because they've been told all their lives that, well, son, you won't be able to make a living at that, so just forget about that stuff. And I can't think what her name is right now, Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, talks about how our society puts down artists. And if you think about it, society is actually very wrong about it, because some of the highest paid people in society are artists, musicians, painters, and so on. Okay, so having said that little sermon part, think about these repetitive patterns, because these are going to give you a clue to your life's purpose. Now, I want to extend this because sometimes people have trouble doing this by themselves, and so I'm going to suggest to you that you may want to do this with another person or a triad. And what you do with a triad is each of you takes turns to going through this process. And when I do this process, I begin by asking another person in my triad to tell me about a time when she was involved in a job that really turned her on. She got really excited about what she was doing. It was really enjoyed. She looked forward to doing it. Perhaps she thought about it on her way to work. And I say, do you remember something like that? And usually almost anybody can tell you about at least one work experience that was a turn-on for them. And you notice I didn't use the word motivating in the language I used, although I'm using it on the slide. But if a person can't think of something, then I switch to another category, or I may ask the person to simply describe the ideal job. If you were in the ideal job, what would it be like? What would you be doing? Who would you be doing it with? What part would you play in it, and so on, okay? And you kind of have to be a little creative if you have to go this route. But you don't have to do it very often, because there's very few people that haven't had some kind of a job assignment that they got excited about. Now, incidentally, the content of the work itself is not so important as the activity. And again, activity means doing something innovative. It could be problem solving. It could be solving puzzles. It could be doing crossword puzzles for that matter, because that's a process or an activity that you're looking for. As the person tells me about this job experience, I make mental notes. I try very hard not to write notes down on paper because I find that it distracts the other person, and it also makes me force myself to learn to listen better. So just listen very carefully. Imagine that you're going to go and report this back to someone else, and that'll force you to listen in a different way than you normally do, because you do want to remember most of the detail that comes out. Okay, so that's the first thing. And if I'm going to make a physical note at all, I will write down a 1 or 2 word description of what the job was, just so that it'll help me to return to it. The next thing I ask a person to tell me about is some outside interest that they engage in. It could be a hobby, it could be a sport, it could be anything they like to do. It could be rock climbing, it could be basket weaving. I don't care what it is. I will ask them not to tell me about a vegetative thing like lying on the beach, because that's not really such an activity as it is just a way of getting out of everything and relaxing. Okay, so I'm looking for something that is an activity itself. And incidentally, you'll find that a lot of people like to play golf or tennis or things like that, but you'll find that most people, well, I shouldn't say most people, that almost everyone plays these sports in a slightly different way with a slightly different slant. So I'll make a comment about that in a moment. Now, well, let me just say, some people will play golf by themselves. I used to know a guy that would get out on the golf course. I lived in Raleigh at the time, and he'd get out on the golf course early in the morning and play around the golf all by himself. What he was about was the challenge of perfecting his swing and his shots and all that sort of thing. Other people want to play golf with other people. They want to go out with a foursome and play golf. And for them, a lot of times it's the social aspect that is the primary thing they like. And they love getting out there with nature and chit-chatting and having fun and so on. And then there are other people that play golf in a very competitive way. They want to beat the heck out of the people that they're with and so on. So get the person to tell you about the sport, what they like about it, what they find challenging. I sometimes say, well, why would you want to do that sort of thing? And I kind of pick on them a little bit so that I hook them into digging down deep inside and figuring out exactly what it is about the thing that they really do like. Because if you make them feel a little ignorant that you're sort of putting down whatever it is in a cheerful way, then they can access what's really important about the hobby, sport, or whatever it is. Okay, so that's the second component. The third one, I'll ask the person to talk to me about something that they have not yet done that they would love to do. Some people call this a bucket list item, and you can also talk about it as a fantasy or a wish list. And I get a lot of people who tell me that if they didn't have any restraints or financial limitations, things of that nature, that they would love to travel. Now, when they tell me that, it's real easy to just say, oh, they'd like to travel. They'd like to go see places. But people travel differently. There are people who like to immerse themselves totally in the culture of the place that they go. They want to mix with the local people. They want to get to know them. They want to interact with them, etc. There are people that don't want to do anything but go and look at the buildings and the museums, and they like to say, been there, done that. It's like checking things off a checklist, and they don't care about the people element. There's other people like the history of the place. There are other people that somehow want to feel that they experienced the place firsthand and lived there long enough to really know what it was like. So dig in, find out what's the big deal about travel. What are you going to do? What are you going to get out of it? And this will help you again to get the person to hook into whatever it is that's really important to them about the activity. So there are people that want to start businesses. There are people that want to create something. There are people that want to live in a different part of the world. And so whatever the fantasy or wish list thing is, go for it. Now, in the event that you can't find one of each of these categories, you can use 3 of any one. You can use a 2-1 mix. Anything that works for you will be fine. I will be totally open with you about this. If I had my preference, I wouldn't even worry about the job, because in many cases people have never had a very rewarding experience at work. And so I'll go with 3 fun things that people do, because if you think about it, we put a great deal more energy into the fun things we do sometimes than the work things that we do. So any kind of mixing and matching that you want to do is fine. You do need 3 things, because if you only have 2 of them, you can get fooled by that. So try to get 3 examples from the person. Okay, now comes the step that's a little hard for people sometimes, and this is one reason it's helpful to do this in a triad rather than to try to do it by yourself, because now what you want to do is look for what's common in the 3 things that the person told you about. I call that looking for the thread that runs through them. And it will always be a pattern of activity, and that's the key. It'll be a pattern of activity. Again, it isn't the content of the activity that matters, but it's what the person does with the content that matters. And as you go through this, what you'll find is that most people don't have single patterns. Usually they have at least 2, sometimes 3, occasionally 4, and you will find that one of the patterns is usually a little bit stronger than the others. Now, I have 3 patterns myself, which are helping, innovation, and now I'm forgetting the third one. Helping and innovation are the 2 big ones, and teaching is the third one. So I combine these in my life, and that's worked out very nicely for me. So once you have the pattern of activity that the person engages in, or the patterns of activity that they engage in, this then is called your motivation pattern. And it gives you a feeling for what your purpose in life is. Now, I was put here to be a teacher. It's been very clear to me for a long time, but teaching allows me to help people, as I hope this is helping you, to achieve something meaningful in your life. And I also love to do innovative things, so I like to try to find new ways to do my classes and share information with people. I tell a lot of stories, as most of you know who have been with me for a while, and so I've combined these things into what I've done for the past 50 years. You see a photograph of me here teaching over in China about 10 years ago, and that was an interesting experience because we had to have a sequential translator because so many of these folks didn't speak real good English. So this will help you to get to thinking about your purpose in life. There are some wonderful books out there that you can use as a source for this, and I would recommend that you take a look on the web for those kinds of things. Now, there is a caution here. One of the problems that we have is that we feel like we need a job. Now, I say you need money in this world, but you don't necessarily need a job to get it. And so I'd like to challenge you to think about the alternative ways that exist in which you can create wealth. Entrepreneurial pursuits means that you can find a way to create a business, an organization of some kind, and there's a little bit of overlap down below here. But being an entrepreneur is not for everybody, but it may be for you. I haven't had a job now in the past 32 years, and I've done quite well for myself. And I actually have, if you like to think of it this way, I actually have more job security than most of you do if you work for someone, because unless all my clients fire me at the same time, I'm pretty secure. If you work for a company of some kind, only one person or maybe 2 needs to decide they want to get rid of you and you're gone. Okay, now I mentioned artistic things. I really, really encourage you, if art of some kind is your thing, instead of saying you'll never make a living at it, you ask yourself this question: if this is what I love to do, how can I make a living at it? And I know a fellow in Franklin, North Carolina, whose name is Michael Rogers. He is a fantastic watercolorist. Started doing watercolor in high school. By the time he was 18, he was doing absolutely superb stuff. He has his own little gallery in Franklin. It's beautifully decorated with his art, and he has found a way to make his art pay. So have a lot of the people out there who are recording records, making music, writing books. Ken Follett has written books that have been published to the tune of about 200 million copies, I believe. You can name your favorite artist that is a bestseller. There are people like Gillian Lynn, who choreographed Cats and Phantom of the Opera. She's a multimillionaire. There are lots of actors who have made lots of money. And given that I live up here in the mountains of North Carolina, where there isn't a lot of industry and business, I am surrounded by people who create crafts, potters, cheesemakers, people that take junk and turn it into novel things, and they found a way to, at least they may not be wealthy, but they have found a way to make a living, and I've been around some of them who are so happy it's just almost annoying to those of us that sometimes get caught up in the rat race. Another way of making money is to invent things. Be an inventor, create something new. Now, consulting can be a job, but it doesn't have to be. Being a tradesperson, a plumber, electrician, carpenter, I know a number of people around here who are good handymen, handywomen that go around, they fix things that other people don't have time to fix. On the internet, there are millions of dollars being made by people every day. There's a young man named Pat Flynn who I've talked about on the How Can I Be Successful website. He has a blog and a website called Smart Passive Income, and he publishes his income figures to prove that what he talks about works, and he's making about $500,000 to $600,000 a year with his internet business. Tim Ferriss wrote a book several years ago called The 4-Hour Work Week. It's an internet, he talks about internet businesses that he's created where he only has to spend 4 hours a week and still pulls in several $100,000 a year with them. And Tim has become quite an entrepreneur in terms of writing books based on this make money in a very short period of time. I will tell you the one way you will not make money, and that is through hard work. That is an old myth that we were told a long time ago that doesn't prove to be true. You need to work smart, not hard. Use your head, not your hands. Now, that doesn't mean that a tradesperson, a plumber, carpenter, and so on isn't going to use their hands, but the ones that do really well also use their heads and come up with some novel approach to what they do, and that differentiates them from the run-of-the-mill person who just gets by every day. So those are a few things for you to think about. Don't fall into the job trap. You need money, but you don't necessarily need a job. If a job is the only thing that you can think of right now, if that's the only route open to you, then by all means stay in your job. Don't do something stupid and say, Jim Lewis said I don't need a job, so I'm going to quit and go out here and make money panhandling or something. If you want to do that, it may be okay, but it's not something I would recommend. Okay, I want to back up to changing beliefs a little bit, because this is something that most of us have a great deal of difficulty with, and I want to give you a few more tips on how to deal with limiting beliefs. And as you can see, this guy is thinking all kinds of negative stuff. I'm not good looking. I'm not entitled to money. I'm useless. Nobody loves me. I'm hopeless. I knew it wouldn't work. I did it again. I'm no good. And if you remember, and you're going to see me say this a couple times in here, Beliefs are formed by what we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves something over and over again until we accept it as valid and true. And especially if we tell it to ourselves with a great deal of feeling, a great deal of emotion. Emotionally charged speech that we tell ourselves with is very powerful in turning these things into what we think are true. And an assignment later today, we'll come back and talk about it in a moment, to watch your self-talk for the next week or so, because these are clues to what your current beliefs are. As you can see, the one about I'm not entitled to money. Well, if a guy had that kind of belief and got lucky somehow and made $1 million, what do you think would happen to him? Well, I know a fellow that had this happen twice. He became quite a celebrity in the self-help business, and he told on the stage that twice he had become a millionaire and twice he lost it, and he discovered that this was a message that he'd been given by adults when he was a kid. I'm not entitled to money. And so he managed to lose it. And it's interesting. You remember last week we talked about the self-fulfilling prophecy. You will somehow unconsciously find ways to make those beliefs come true. So if you believe you're not entitled to the money, you'll squander it, lose it. You know, it's interesting. There are people that win the lottery and they're totally miserable after they win the lottery because they've got this belief deep down inside that they're not entitled to money. And they usually wind up losing it fairly quickly. You see sports players who get paid millions of dollars who wind up broke very quickly. And I'm going to give you a few references to books here tonight. Here's one on this particular slide, You Are What You Say by Matthew Budd and Larry Rothstein. And I would recommend that you take a look at some of these and spend a little bit of time reading these books, because the self-talk thing is a very powerful way to create and maintain beliefs. Now, one component of self-talk is what I call the inner critic. And in neuro-linguistic programming, which I studied many years ago, we talked about tapes that play in our heads. And these are the messages that we internalize from our parents, other adults in our lives, maybe teachers and so on. And you'll hear these tapes go off sometimes when something happens. For example, you see this woman saying to herself, oh, why did I say that? Oh, I'm stupid, stupid, stupid for saying that. She's feeling very embarrassed and so on. There's a book that specifically addresses the inner critic called Soul Without Shame, A Guide to Liberating Yourself from the Judge Within. It's by Byron Brown. And all of these books can be gotten from your friendly Amazon.com or other bookstores. So you may want to take a look at these. Incidentally, these are not books that you can just sit down and read. You have to practice what they tell you. You have to go through the exercises, because you didn't get into these things just in 2 minutes or so. You got into them over a longer period of time, and sometimes it can take a while to get out of them. Here's one that I think is fascinating because somebody said this to me just today. I was really just amazed when this person said this to me. The self-defeating belief is that rich people are bad, dishonest, or got their money through unsavory means. I can remember when I was a kid, and I've heard it all my life, that anytime you mention somebody that has a lot of money, oh, well, you know, they didn't get it honestly, or they cheated people to get it, or they didn't work for it, or whatever it may be. There are a lot of people that disparage Bill Gates right now, and I tell you, it's coming from this very same thing, that rich people are somehow bad. Now, if you believe that and you feel that way, how can you ever become wealthy? Because you would then be one of those bad people that you're putting down. Rather, you have to change your view to be happy that these individuals are proof that you too can be wealthy. Now, I've forgotten the number, so you can Google it yourself and find out how many billionaires are in the United States right now and how many millionaires, and you are going to be totally shocked. It's huge. We've never lived in a time as prosperous as we're in right now, despite the fact that there's a recession going on. Doug DiCarlo and I both love the comment we heard from, I believe it was a Lexus dealership out in California when the recession started several years ago. They thought about it. They weren't having people come into the dealership and buy cars anymore. In fact, they weren't coming in and looking at cars. And they said, you know, we've decided we're not going to participate in this recession. We're going to keep on doing our business, but we're going to do it in a different way. And they ask themselves, if the people won't come to us, how can we take our cars to them? And, of course, part of the deal is who can still afford a Lexus car or an upscale car of some kind. And so they arranged to go out to the country club and take a car out and tell people, hey, look at our new car, and would you like to test drive it, and so on. And needless to say, they got through the recession, or have gotten through the recession, without being too badly burned by it. So if you catch yourself repeating what you heard people say when you were young about rich people being bad or dishonest or undeserving or whatever it may be, pinch yourself and reinterpret that and think about the fact that what they've done is proven that you too can become a wealthy person if that's what you'd like to do. Another little, I'm not ready to improve my life. I'm still in the stage. So if you happen to be in the stage of not being ready to improve your life, then you'll just have to stay in the complaining stage for a little while, and the rest of us will go on around, and you can catch up later. I want to give you something to chew on, because one of the limiting beliefs that we have is I'm not capable, I'm not smart enough, I'm not educated enough, I'm not whatever it may be. There's just all kinds of messages that we get that tell us that we're not ready. When I was in college, excuse me, I had a friend who was an electrical engineering student as I was, and he told me one day that his IQ was only 109. Now, if you know anything about electrical engineering or mechanical engineering students, typically 125 is about the low end of the scale, and it goes on up from there. And so 109 is not one standard deviation up from the mean. It's standard deviation is about 15 points, so 2 standard deviations up is really where most engineering students are going to fall, and on up above that. Well, this guy had the last laugh. He graduated with a 3.85 average, and the only reason he didn't have a 4.0 was because he made a B in physical education, which really did annoy him a lot because it hurt his GPA and was something that he didn't have as much control over as he did his mental capability. But he went on and got a PhD in EE. And the one thing I observed about this fellow was that it took him longer to learn things than it did some of us who might have been higher IQ. But the disgusting thing about him was that he never seemed to forget it. I'm convinced that if he's still around and still working today, and I haven't heard from him in 50 years now, he probably remembers most of what he learned in college, because the fact that he had to work so much harder at it meant he had to retain it quick. As if we learned it quickly, we tended to forget it quickly. He convinced me that for the most part, if you have average capability, average intelligence, that sort of thing, as far as mental pursuits are concerned, you can learn anything you want to. And I strongly believe that. I've seen evidence of it in many, many people. And I also would submit to you that if you're a kinesthetic learner like Gillian Lynn, who choreographed Cats, you may have to look in another area for your talent, but you've got it, because everybody has gifts of some kind. And it turns out that Howard Gardner has shown that there are 9 kinds of intelligence, not just the verbal and math that we use to measure IQ. And some of you have high music intelligence, some may have high spatial intelligence. And if you'd like to take a close look at that, look up the work of Howard Gardner, Gardner, and multiple intelligences, because there are people out there who are geniuses in art or physics or whatnot, and don't score all that highly in math and verbal skills. I saw this little ditty and thought this was cute as well. 6 of our top competitors have written to thank us for hiring you, so hopefully none of us are in that category. All right, one more technique for changing limiting beliefs and building positive beliefs. I've mentioned to you in one of the previous 2 lessons that when I was a boy, I was pretty hopeless. I grew up in a family that was fairly limited in its outlook, and so I was shy. I was afraid of girls as I became a teenager. A lot of boys are. I was lacking in self-confidence. I wasn't a very good student, and I didn't hear this from anybody. I don't know why I did it, but I started before I went to sleep at night imagining, for example, meeting the girl of my dreams. I imagined winning at things that I was interested in. I imagined being confident and self-assured. In short, I reprogrammed myself. And I did that every night for most of my high school years. And I'm happy to say that I rid myself of a lot of those limiting fears and beliefs and lack of confidence and all that sort of thing. Again, a belief is a story you've told yourself until you've accepted it as true. So if you tell yourself a positive story, a different story, a new story, over time, that becomes internalized so that you are no longer the same person that you were when you had those old stories that were going around in your head. Okay. Our next topic tonight is dealing with bad situations, because some of us are in those spots, and some of us, as it says in this cartoon here, may be suffering from stress because of that bad situation. And so let's talk about what we can do when we're in those kind of situations. This is something I learned, fortunately, a long time ago, because I had been in a job situation when I was still an engineer. I wanted out of the situation. I didn't know what I was going to do. There didn't seem to be any place to go. And so I was feeling pretty down and out and hopeless about it. And I was reading a book one day, and the person writing the book, and I've long now forgotten who it was, said, you always have 4 choices. And this is the first. You got to change the situation. You can change how you feel about the situation. You can leave it. Or, number 4, you can stay and be miserable. So let's talk about these choices one at a time. The first one, and the one that most often is the preferred choice, is to try to change the situation. If it's a totally toxic situation, it may be impossible to change, and therefore this choice is not really a very possible choice or a good choice. But if you had been in India back when Mahatma Gandhi decided that he didn't like the fact that India was being oppressed by England, he broke the hold on India by nonviolent protest. He didn't just sit by passively and complain, isn't it awful? He actually got out and took an active role in helping break it. It would have been extremely easy for him to sit back and say, I'm just one guy. Think about that. That's what most of us do. We say, oh man, we can't do anything about the government. Congress is just at a standstill right now. They're not getting anything done. And I'm just one person. What can I do about it? And so it'd be real easy to take that same stand, but Gandhi didn't do that. And because he didn't do it, India won its freedom from England. For those of you that would like more insight into how you too can be more influential, there is a great book called Influencer, The Power to Change Anything, by Carrie Patterson and about 3 other authors. And I really highly recommend this book. It's an absolutely superb book. It's one that we use at NC State University in our seminar, Communicate, Influence, and Negotiate. And we have found that the techniques in this book are just absolutely perfect for changing situations. So if you're in a situation that you'd like to try to change, here's help, okay? Now, the second choice you have is to try to change your feelings. That is, how do I feel about the situation? And you notice that what this woman's trying to do is replace her sort of sad face with a happy face, because presumably if she has the happy face on, it's because she feels better about things. We, in particular, have problems with our feelings in relationships, whether it be a job relationship, a marital relationship, a partnership, or whatnot. And no relationship situation is ever going to be perfect. I have thought for many years now that if you're in a relationship in which about 80% of the time it's good, and the annoyances that you do experience aren't major, it may very well be possible to simply say, I'm not going to let the minor things bother me. I'm just not going to let the minor things get to me. There's a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff, and that's the right attitude. Sometimes we can't do it, but if you can, and you're not kidding yourself that you are changing your feelings, that is, you still feel deep down inside that it's bad and you're upset by it, then this is a very good choice. But if you are still upset by the situation and just fooling yourself, what you're doing then is taking the status quo choice, which is number 4, and that's not a good long-term choice, as we'll see in a moment. Okay. Sometimes you can't do either of those two things. You can't change the situation, you can't change your feelings about it, or you're not willing to try to change your feelings about it. And so the third choice is to leave. Now, this one tricks a lot of people because they say, well, I can't leave. I can't support myself. I don't have a job. I don't have any way to make a living. I got 3 kids, and my wife's not going to pay me alimony if I leave her, and all this stuff, you know. But I'm not saying you have to do it overnight, but I am saying that you should plan how to get there. When I was at ITT and I was unhappy, it took me 8 years to find a way out, but I did find a way out, and what kept me from suffering from the situation was the fact that I did know I was going to get out. I was working on a way out. Now, there is one caveat here. If you are in a repetitive pattern, meaning that you keep finding yourself in these bad situations. I've been in 27 relationships in the past 3 years, and every one of them has gone bad. Then until you change your consciousness, if you leave the current situation, you're just going to wind up in another one almost identical to it. As it says in red, if you always think what you've always thought, you'll always get what you always got. And so before you leave this one, you need to try to change your consciousness so that you don't come back into it again. When I say change your consciousness, there is usually some kind of belief that is pulling you into these things. We have patterns of activity in interacting with each other that are sometimes destructive, and we get back into those same patterns again and stay stuck. So watch out for that. Okay, the last one, status quo. This is acceptable for the short term, but not the long term. It means you stay in the situation that's causing you a great deal of stress, and if you do that, when you're under stress, your brain causes toxic chemicals to be produced in your and they get in your bloodstream and attach to the cell walls in your body. When that happens, the cell wall shuts down, and it means that no toxins get into the cell, but then neither can nutrients go in, and waste can't get out. And so if the cell stays in this state for very long, it dies. If very many cells in your body die, the rest of you dies. It's literally true. Stress will kill you. Again, a great book on this subject is by Bruce Lipton. It's called The Biology of Belief, and Bruce talks about this and how stress is something that we want to avoid. Also, all negative emotions, anger, grief, depression, despair, all those kinds of things have the very same effect as stress. So there's a book called You Can't Have the Luxury of a Negative Thought, and that's true. You can't stand the luxury or can't have the luxury of a negative thought. Okay, so there are your 4 choices, and it can be really hard to figure out which one to take, but I would urge you to work at that and Fix it if you can. Change your feelings if you can. If not, get the heck out. And don't, for goodness sakes, get trapped with this one. Why do you keep this job? It's killing you. I need the health insurance. And I have known a number of people in my life who have been stuck by, I need the health insurance, and all the while the reason they needed the health insurance was because the job was causing them to be sick all the time. All right, last thing in this list, and it's coming up on 8 o'clock, so I need to move through this. Some of you are going to find, if you look closely, that you have friends who drag you down. They've got a negative effect on you. They may see that when you start trying to be successful, they say things to you like, don't get above your raisin, or you're reaching too high, or you'll never make it. And I've had friends like that, and you have to quit associating with those people and find yourself some friends who are positive in their outlook and success motivated and so on. It's very hard to do if some of them happen to be your family, and if that's the case, then you just have to find a way to limit the amount of time that you're around them. And when you are around them, you have to build a buffer around yourself where when they make these kinds of comments to you, you let them roll off your skin, so to speak, and not let them get to you, because they will try to drag you down into the same hole they're in, as a song used to say that Bob Dylan wrote many years ago. And as this person's saying, your negative thoughts are hanging out in my workspace again, because that is exactly what will happen to you. Okay, that's the content. What I'd like for all of you to do this next week is monitor your self-talk. And I want to really strongly recommend to you that you start keeping a journal, and you go back through your day at the end of the day and record some of these things that you've observed. You're going to initially think that it's difficult to monitor yourself and be acting at the same time, but you will get the hang of it. I will also tell you to use your phone, if you have, especially if you have an MP3 recorder in your phone, and record notes to yourself so that you can transcribe them to your journal later in the day. And then the other thing to do is, if you're interested in pods, get on the website and post a note to let other people know where you are and that you're interested in being a part of a pod. And I'll give you some further guidance on these as we go along, but essentially just get together and talk about the principles that you've learned, and if there are any of them that are giving you some difficulty and you might need some support from someone else, that might. I was in a pod situation for a year when I took a coaching program, and I found that I got some real benefit from them, so I think some of you would as well. Okay, a little commercial announcement. We have put the Total Success app on the Google Play Store. This is for the Android platform. We'll have the Apple platform converted in about 2 more weeks, I hope. And there is a free trial version so that you can only put one goal in it and try it out. And if you like it, then you can upgrade to the purchase version. If you'd like to write down the tiny URL address here, it's D8VW3XG, and that'll take you right to the app in the Google Play Store, or you can simply search for Total Success and you'll find it in there. And that is pretty much it for this evening, and with about 2 minutes to spare, if any of you have any questions, rather than hold you up, would you just send them to me by email? Remember, it's lewisinstitute@yahoo.com, lewisinstitute@yahoo.com, or post them on my page in the Success website, and I'll do my best to try to answer those for you. I should have the recording of this program on the website by about noon tomorrow, certainly over the weekend if I get sidetracked somehow. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your diligence and dedication to being successful, and hope that this is useful to you. And please send me suggestions if there are things that you'd like for me to address, and I will try to do that for you as time goes by. This is session 3. We still have 9 to go, and Good luck to all of you. Have a great weekend, and I will see you same time, same place next Thursday evening.